So my name is Jen, and I'm a startup junkie. No, hi, Jen. Thank you. I am currently with NewsCred in my third startup since 2007. So I've ridden the wave of building, optimizing, and scaling customer success teams. My very first startup was in an on-prem installed solution, which for some of you who know, understand what that's like. It's like juggling in the dark. So going to SaaS is almost like cheating. It's been very, very fun figuring out how to be successful in that group. So as I kind of go through this, you're probably going to hear a little bit more of my edgy point of view. I generally drink too much, smoke too much, and curse too much, so I'm going to try and keep it very calm for this session. I cannot promise my language will not be in line with the integrity of the conference. So to kick off, so why is your first CSM so important, or your first one or two CSM hires? You know, when I think about this, I'm a type of person, I like to read and research postmortems on things that have gone wrong. There's a really great blog post on CB Insights for last year that's like 101 startup failure postmortems. And in that research, what they found is still 75 to 90% of startups fail. So it's not a right that you're going to be successful. It's a privilege that you get yourself to a point where you can scale and be a company of consequence. And so that's a really important factor to consider, knowing that the main reasons why startups fail still are market fit. The second reason why they fail is losing money, running out of money, chasing that market fit. And your CSMs and you in the customer success world are a big part of that accountability factor of making sure that you've got the right people in the front lines, listening to customers, having a lot of credibility, being empathetic, transferring that voice back to the product team, and making sure everybody's accountable, understanding what's really resonating and what's not. So it's really important for the long-term success in this regard specifically. The short-term wins are pretty apparent, right? You want to get in, begin relationships, think about your retention model, but the long-term success is just so much more, it's so much more important to focus on because it actually has impacts that last you 4 and 5 years down the road. And once you get started and you hire those first couple of people, it's really hard to change direction, and specifically when we think about setting the tone of the culture. And when I speak about culture, there's two different threads. One is externally with your customers. If you think about when you hire the CSM and you put them in the role, even if it's very early stage, you're broadcasting to your clients. You're telling them, here's how I think about you, and here's how I want you to think about me. Here's how I demonstrate how much I understand you. And you're setting the tone for how the company's going to build its foundation and come all the way up. And on the inside, one of the things that I wish somebody would have told me in my first startup was setting the tone of the culture internally is equally as important. And so if you think about the kind of win you can get with your existing teams, you know, when you bring a CSM, you're about halfway through the hiring model. So you likely have salespeople enroll, you have product people enroll, you have those early stage folks. You probably maybe don't have HR yet, maybe systems ops folks yet. But so the CSMs are kind of right there in the sweet spot in the middle. And generally, the company is moving very, very quickly. If you're a venture-backed company, you're going 100 miles an hour. These first CSMs that you hire have to be able to segue right into that racetrack and get right in the mix with them and keep up. Right, we need a dramatic pause. So the question becomes, how do you get the first people right? And I think my point of view is a little aggressive, so work with me here. I look for raw talent. Customer service skills are great. If you can find purple unicorns that take these 3 non-negotiable traits and you can put them all together and they have this amazing customer success background, put a lasso on that unicorn and don't let them go. But most of the time, you have to build those folks. And if you can harness that kind of raw talent, you can actually make an impact in the rest of the company. And I've taken this approach with 2 teams that I've built to be a bit of an incubator. I like to seed the rest of the organization. Part of it because it's great to have talent. But a lot of the folks that I hire initially, they might not be qualified to go in the product team. They might not be qualified to go into sales. They're looking for a shot at a hot startup, and they really want to be a part of the organization. And so when you think about a year, 2 years down the road, you got a product person, you got a person on your team that you've groomed, has been on the front line with the customer, has lots of empathy, and then they become a product manager. It is priceless the amount of tailwind you get off of that. They understand much more than a product manager who's never been on the front lines. So infiltrate your company. I've got my Trojan horse all over the organization, and it pays off dividends for internally and externally. Number 2, I used a nicer word, give a damn. There's another one for it, but we'll keep that G-rated. So high give a damn factor. I don't look for well-rounded. I look for people who take things very personally. People who, in their background, you think about the profile, the behavioral profile of these folks. They have a background of really just wanting to win and a history of excellence. Maybe they were on a rowing crew in college and just are obsessively focused with winning. You've got to understand that when you're working with these folks, you want them to be as obsessively focused as the founders are. Many times when you've got your CSM, you're taking the relationship from other parts of the company. Maybe it's working well, maybe it's not. But they've got to have a level of credibility and respect among the internal workings of the company to get in there and for people to trust that they can take that over. I mean, I don't know how many of you have the experience where you've got customers with the CEO on speed dial, right? That's important that as a CEO sort of lets go of that control and the customer begins to say, okay, you're passing me off now to a customer success manager. Now I don't have the CEO, and now I'm going to be really upset, right? So you've got to have the obsession, the same obsession that the founders do. And the third one, I use this word on here very specifically, the word cowboys. Most of us in this room, we think of cowboys in the setting of a startup. We think of salespeople with a shitty deal coming across the fence, right? The sales guy's out there selling stuff you just can't deliver on, and you're out there just fighting fires, trying to keep your head above water. I think of that same term actually on the post-sale side. If you're great at following processes, you're going to be disappointed, and you might survive startup. These CSMs might make it, but what you want the people who thrive in it. Don't worry about people who can kind of just get through. People that love the chaos, they love the hunt, they love coming to work every day and having a new set of challenges, and it doesn't discourage them, it actually encourages them, and they're a bit of the adrenaline junkies of the world, is how I look at them. And one of the reasons I look for that is because one of the other sessions we were talking about earlier was the scale of startup, of maturity. In those early stages, you're not mature enough to lead with process. You're not mature enough to say, hey, last month I decided onboarding would look like X, Y, and Z, and here's how that's going to go. Most of the time, you're going to tear it down in a month and rebuild it and try something again and try something again. You don't want folks in that role that are going to take that personally. You want people who are worried about outcomes, not about how they got there. It's tough. It's not a series of zeros and ones. It really is it's an experiential thing. It's a little bit of it's more of a feeling out process before you decide this is how we're going to be for the next year. Very few decisions I make in any given day are good for a year. My shelf life is roughly 3 months, and your CSM should be right about there as well. So my parting comments is no pressure, but pressure. As leaders in the customer success world that we're in, it is our mandate to protect the organization. It's our mandate to help the company earn its way to actually earn the right to compete in the battlefield, compete in the marketplace. Markets are still forming. And NewsCred right now happens to be in a space and content marketing is what we're in. And the space is still forming. It's still shaping. People are still trying to figure out what they want. Companies are still trying to figure out what value they provide. And you've got to really have to be focused on making sure you get you have the win every quarter over quarter. You have the path to success, and the CSMs are comfortable helping you get there, and thinking like the founder. It's a really interesting phenomenon to watch your first couple of CSMs jump in and work directly with chief technology officers, work directly with the product team. It's such a privilege and it's such a nice thing to see some of these folks who have very little experience that are just driven to get in there and make a huge difference and begin their career in customer success. And maybe they promote on and they begin to build their own teams, and maybe they move outside of that. But think like a founder and don't box yourself into processes. And the last one is get the people DNA right. I cannot underscore enough. When you think about winning, you think about a startup making it and being wildly successful, if you look at those case studies, contrary to the postmortems of failure, it is always the people, right? The people who make product decisions, the people who engage with customers. That is by far the most important factor to consider. Check your left brain at the door for a minute and really think about the experience, the human-to-human experience, and look at DNA for the CSMs and worry about process secondary. So process will always come. You don't have to worry about that. Somebody's going to figure out how to do it. And And that's my wrap, and I'm right on time. We'll save questions for after Aaron. Thank you.
All right.